you can't really just force someone into, hey, you need to do this, 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 and this, and that's going to unlock, this for you. Like, come do this daily log tool and fill out, all these fields. And it's like, maybe we want this other field, or we don't want this field, right? Like, that's where like it becomes like something that you're trying to force someone into this mold versus giving them a tool that's like very flexible to them. And that's probably not fair to say to like a daily log tool, because like it's very niche into that one thing. But a lot of these systems out there are like very, niche. And even Provizual is niche into inspections and visualization. But a niche tool needs to be flexible to any use case.
Hey everyone, thanks again for listening to another episode of Future of Construction. Today I'm speaking with John Andrus, founder and CEO of Provizual. John, thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thanks, Chloe.
I've always wanted to do this with you. I know we've met like many moons ago in like Napa at a Zakua event. So
yeah,
it's been
our rough beginnings.
I think we talked about hunting up in Canada.
Probably so.
Yeah, I think you come across the border a couple times.
No, I've never come across the border. I wanted to go on an elk hunting trip, but
you do mostly
Texas.
Mostly Texas. Okay. John, tell me how you got into construction.
That's a fun story. I grew up in a family of construction people. So my grandfather's in construction, my uncle, my dad, my cousins. So it kind of became the natural thing to do. I started my summers as a teenager, and when I was 18, working in the field, doing sweeping and setting up safety handrails. And then one day I got my Bobcat certification so I could drive a skid steer. Soon after that, realized I didn't want to be in the field, and that I wanted to join the office side and learn that side of construction. So that's kind of where I started like getting into like the technology side of things, really focusing on that side.
Okay, so you spent the last 6 years of that career working with a large general contractor as a director of technology.
Yeah.
Tell me more about what like the day-to-day of that role looked like.
Yeah, so my role was like basically searching for problems within our company and seeing how tech could solve them. So like my job was to research, vet, implement, and train on tech. So I went out and researched, what things could help our company. So that's from feedback that I was getting from the field and from the office of what things they wanted to see. I would go out and find different solutions. I would vet them and go and do demos and try to run pilots on some things. And then when we came down to implementation, I'd go out in the field and make sure that we got the teams to use the tool, and that we were providing that feedback to the different companies. So we like to get in with startups, like very early stage startups, and have that feedback, all along the way, and really like help build a tool together with that startup.
How did you find these startups in the first place?
Anywhere from LinkedIn to conferences.
Really?
Yeah.
LinkedIn.
Yeah. Actually, my favorite construction tech company was from a LinkedIn message.
Like someone reached out to
Just an outreach on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And you were just, at the time, were you in that role? Were you receptive to it?
Yeah. So that I was in that role. People were already like reaching out to me about other things, and something about that one jumped out. There's a lot of these LinkedIn messages like, shoot, I'm doing it now, where I'm reaching out to people. But, sometimes those are like the best connections, because you can really, you see what is that person's profile is, and you understand like a little bit about them before reaching out to them.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out to be really, really good. They'd done their research on me and realized like we were a good market fit for them. And that's kind of how we jumped off.
Is this a common role, this director of technology role? Is this a common role in a lot of like larger GCs or even construction companies in general?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know if it's necessarily like, I think the title's always different.
Yeah.
So you have people that are like director of technology, then you have like innovation people, then there's the VDC route. I think the like really interesting thing is that there's like almost two schools of thought on like where your tech department starts from.
Mm-hmm.
The really big established companies had VDC departments first. And I think have developed like their tech side of their company from their VDC team. And then you have maybe people who didn't have VDC first, and they've now they've jumped in more of the operations side, field focused technology, and then they're adding on VDC. So that's kind of how it worked at Andrus. It was, I started the tech stuff, and then we brought on VDC.
Oh, so you actually did it backwards.
Yeah, so we did backwards from like the traditional method.
Interesting.
BIM models aren't like fully prevalent in all types of construction still.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't really a thing that we had to have 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
Now it's, becoming more prevalent, and, I think the value's there.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of thankful that we went into it in this backwards way, because it was very much this like field focused approach, and it's driven by the field rather than the tech person. It's more office. Like, I love the VDC team.
Yes.
But sometimes VDC is like stuck in the perfect world.
Yeah.
Right. Because they're trying to get things clash free.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes you have to live in the imperfect world, which is the field, and like understand the complexities of a construction project.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that people aren't, the people are having to do something and then jump down to the field to take a delivery, and then something happens over here, and someone was stupid over there, and you got to go. You're jumping around all over the place in the field, and so it's an imperfect science, and so having like a different mindset there, I think, can benefit the team.
I know we're going to get into Provizual and talk all about that, but for me, I've always looked at, we've known each other for a little while now, and I've always looked at your role as so fascinating, because you come from the other side of the table. And a lot of the stuff that we talk about on this podcast is, how does each kind of representative or kind of party in adoption of technology and construction view adoption and view change management and view how they bring new ideas to their role. And you sitting on both sides, like, help me understand Provizual, the genesis of that. I mean, you saw so many other startups working in so many other spaces. I know that you've also participated on the investment arm of all of that. Where did Provizual stand out as something that was absolutely missing in the industry?
It's a great question. So yes, I looked at a lot of things. I always come back to like the problems in the field that our teams were facing, and what solutions were solving those problems. A lot of what I looked at was like Excel spreadsheets and broken processes, and manual things just drive me insane. And the other thing is like doing something in a way that, like, in a format that's required. Someone says I have to do it this way. Well, that doesn't mean you have to like fill it out that way. Like, you can collect the data in some other way and then transform the data into however they need it. And so that's where I kind of like started this like thought process about Provizual, and how like we could basically create a visual tool to understanding the data that we were collecting in the field, so that it made it easy for the teams to understand, but also was something that the teams, when they were going out and collecting this data, that it was actually benefiting them. Right. So a lot of the tools that we see out there, you might be having the team out there, and they're out there collecting information, but it doesn't really impact them directly that day, or even that within that week, on how to do their job. Right. It's really seen to them as like a burden, because there's no benefit to them. Right. And so that's kind of like a long way to get around. Like, I saw this data point that we were then like having a confusing way of like showing the progress from our quality control inspections.
Yeah.
Right. We were collecting it, and it's this long list view. And it's like, okay, how do we provide this like value to the project team? Because we need them to go collect these inspections. But like, how do you give value to the team to basically transform that data into like a visual tool that they're able to quickly understand what's going on in their project based on that information they went and grabbed from the field, right? That's like where we started. And then it came into this like thing about inspections, right? And people, I think, you learn when you're like going across the United States and the world, how different, like the same word can mean different things in different areas.
Mm-hmm.
It's wild, but really cool to learn, right? And so when I talk to people about inspections, some people are like, oh, inspections, like permit inspections. And you're like, oh yeah, those two, like, and it kind of got me back to like one of their spreadsheets that our people were going on and manually tracking inspections and they're logging into the city every day. It's like, how do you make that easier for people and taking this data and making it visual to them?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, like we're very visual creatures in construction. Like we're not building the building based on reading books, right? Reading words. Like you're reading, yeah, there's a spec book, but like in your contracts, but like most everything from the building is like you're reading measurements because you're looking at drawings and understanding drawings, right? And old school, like you'd come in and you'd highlight things and, it's very visual and very like color focused. And I just didn't see anything that was out there like really trying to solve that, in a way that it can work on every project with like the 2D drawings as the base.
And why inspections? Like, was there a specific aspect of, I mean, you talk about the inspection process being one, you're getting all of this data that is like not fun to collect. And then it's being put into a spreadsheet and, now it's in a list view. We're not in that visual space where we're like drawing with pen, with markers and stuff like that and color coding. And so help me understand, like, what is the crux here? What is the challenge when it comes to inspections? And if we could just solve for that, what value does that bring to the job, to the companies involved, so on?
That kind of starts getting into like the bigger picture of what we're trying to solve for.
Yeah.
And it's always interesting that I don't think I've actually even talked about this publicly yet. So,
yay.
so
Exclusive.
we'll make this the first place. But the concept of like locations on a job site, they're very dynamic. And I like to compare construction to like an assembly line, right? An automotive assembly line. And the only difference is that the car is the location, the physical room that you're in is a car. And in the assembly line, the car is what moves. And in construction, it's the people that are moving, right? The trades that are moving from one station to the next. And so a lot of what we have to do is progress along the line because so that car is moving along the line, but because the car's not moving, the people are, they need to progress things, right? And so it's a visual progress tracker. And then from that, it's okay, once you get to a certain station, the car needs to have a quality control, functionality done, right? Did you install the bodywork correctly, right? So that's the quality control piece, right? So it's progress. Okay, quality control. Now, after you've done quality control, maybe there's a third party, system that needs to come in place. That's your city, inspections or your third party inspectors. And the whole thing is like, how do you tie this together and shorten gaps of like knowledge times? A lot of time is wasted from people having to walk on a job site before they start their next trade. Countertop guys walk in the job to see where cabinets have been installed, right? Like that's wasted time for him. Same with like sheetrocker. He's, constant communication to figure out like, am I ready? Like what's going to be holding me up? What areas can I work? What areas can I not?
What does it look like?
Yeah. So like making all that visual in order to basically eventually turn our job sites into this like how an assembly line works, where like there's data feeding in and exactly where your bottlenecks are and where you can, where you have room to run.
Interesting. And so help me understand, I mean, today, what does Provizual look like in terms of a product? Like what am I, the user, interacting with so that I can see that visual assembly line? And it might be a part of it today.
Yeah.
Building up to something bigger.
So today we have, an integration in a Procore. So we pull over your Procore inspections, observations, and punch lists. And we also have our own checklist tool, which is kind of that progress that I was talking about. So like you can make, your own checklist for production, or you could do a checklist. Like we had someone do it for closing out a building and tracking like the owner turnover.
Cool.
And so like being able to like status each room quickly and like so that the whole team understands and can pull that up in a meeting and understand like what's been signed off, right? So yeah, I mean we ingest your 2D PDFs, like that's our big thing is that we're 2D. I think 2D is going to stay around for a pretty long time. And so, I'm all about like, I'm a realist. And so like I build for like what's right now. Right. And so like, that's what I'm focused on, is like building for a solution that works today.
I mean, when you and I were talking about this previously, like, I think that's something it's a really important distinction that you make about, I have to also build for 2D drawings, even though we live in a digital world, because some sectors of construction don't use BIM or 3D models yet. And so when your users are pulling this up, they're actually pulling up their 2D drawing and visually being able to see what areas are inspected according to the color codes that they've created.
Yeah, we've got a superintendent actually down in Austin I've known my whole life. And he always says, like, you have to break it down to the lowest common denominator, right? And so, like, the 2D PDF is something that everyone on the project team understands. The models, people, I think, get them, and it helps a lot of people understand the like solving problems in the future. But when it comes down to it, like, everyone can understand a 2D PDF. That's what everyone's using as their guide, their map through the project. And like, so let's just use that as the background for this data, right?
When we talked about this a few weeks ago, you had mentioned, bringing in inspector data or inspection data from the city in more of a real-time fashion, being able to overlay it in a real-time fashion so that we're not spending a lot of time looking things up in different places. We're kind of all able to come into Provizual and see, okay, this is single source of truth. This is our Bible. Help me understand that kind of world of data. You're looking at so many different sources and you're bringing them together. Help me understand, like, what is all going into these visuals?
Yes, there's a bunch of different data out there. And I think the most important thing is like how to like group them together. And I think the piece that connects everything is the location, right? And locations are so critical to construction because throughout the course of construction, locations change, right? It could be that you're talking about pours when you're pouring concrete, and then later on you're talking about levels, but then, this trade is going to batch up this size of rooms to be this area, and then another one's going to have a framing section. And so there's people are calling areas and places on your project different things throughout the course of your project. And so, locations need to be this like dynamic thing that like, you can group them for this time and place, right? Because that data that you're bringing in may only be for this stuff, right? Say you get an engineering report that's talking about the piers A1, B1, C1. Well, there's no location for A1, B1, C1, but like you can group those three together for that location for that time, right? And so like locations need to be very dynamic because that's the thing that glues the data to the drawings, right? That's how we connect everything.
And are you reading those engineering reports using like AI, or are you?
We're gonna get there.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay,
like that's roadmap,
yeah.
Right? Which roadmap is, like you said earlier, like some things you have to put on the shelf, right? So that's on the shelf for now.
Yep.
We're working on the city inspection data stuff right now.
Yeah.
And then after that, that's something that we're looking to, basically bring into the product.
Talk to me about adoption. How easy or difficult has that been in terms of getting people to think this way, getting people to adopt Provizual?
That's like probably the hardest thing, is that you come into a company that, you don't know anything about how they do things. And so it's very much like having to ask questions like, how do y'all break up inspections? Like, what's y'all's quality control process like? What kind of buildings are you building, right? And like you have to ask all these questions and kind of peel back the layers and then help, understand like you've built a tool, right? And I think that's probably like one of the things that a lot of construction software might not feel like today to a lot of people, is that like they see that you've built a robot, right? The robot maybe only works that certain way. And I'm very focused on building a tool that can be used, like, Microsoft Excel, for example, right? Mm-hmm. It can do anything you need it to do, right? It's how you use it is how it's going to be helpful to you, right? It's not, you have to stay in this cookie cutter thing. So like if you wanted to look at your facade plans, you could bring in your facade drawing and doing inspections on your facade. It's very like, however your drawings are, you can customize it to your drawings, to your workflow. It's to fit the project, because every single project is a one-time thing, right? I think Todd Wynn always talks about it being like, it's a one-time prototype, right? That we have to get right the first time when we're building these deals, right? Yeah. And you're never going to build this building again, right? And so like the software needs to also be in this like prototype mode that it can like work for whatever thing gets thrown at it when you're like using this as like it's a tool to the job, right?
Did that come from being on the other side of the table, or what really informed that direction for you?
I think that's something like when I was looking at all this tech, that like a lot of people wanted you to fit their mold. You can't really just force someone into, hey, you need to do this, 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 and this, and that's going to unlock, this for you. Like, come do this daily log tool and fill out, all these fields. And it's like, maybe we want this other field, or we don't want this field, right? Like, that's where like it becomes like something that you're trying to force someone into this mold versus giving them a tool that's like very flexible to them. And that's probably not fair to say to like a daily log tool, because like it's very niche into that one thing. But a lot of these systems out there are like very, niche, and even Provizual is niche into inspections and visualization. But a niche tool needs to be flexible to any use case. And not, when I say use case, I'm not talking building type, right? Because like
something standardized.
Yeah, so like a daily log is going to be a daily log on a hospital versus a multifamily. But like getting to where like it's really customized to your project, it's really needed. And it's something I didn't see a lot of projects, or like a lot of softwares out there really solving for.
And that to me is, I think, one of the most fascinating directions that a lot of this construction tech software is taking, or at least the new folks that I'm seeing in industry are taking, is this ability to have mass flexibility. Whereas I think a lot of older products literally give you, here's the template within which you need to operate. Mm-hmm. Now, this might be a hot take, and I'm so interested to hear what you have to say. Data products specifically require a data strategy. And if there's no one there to interpret it for you or help develop your data strategy, how do you know where to start if you're an industry that doesn't use data for decision-making as commonly as, say, others? That's been my kind of barrier to a lot of this, is like, how much trust do I give the user to know what to do with the information? Because we originally built Mercator to be like, we have this like plethora of real-time construction data, any stage in a construction project that you're interested in. And like, we gave a lot of trust to our users, like in the initial phase, for them to tell us how they want to use it within their business development process. And then what we realized was we actually have to give them some sort of box to operate in. And then from there, they can build their own data strategy. So I'm very curious what you think about giving people that much flexibility, that much freedom, and whether or not we're in a stage where people know how to use data to make decisions.
Great questions. I think how like Provizual attacks this is that, one, locations are going to be very job specific, right? And so like the flexibility is into the fact that you're defining your locations and you're creating how those locations are going to work together and how they're going to talk to another location and so on and so forth. The back end side is like how you set up the data collection that's going to feed to those locations. I think there's some really interesting things there on like when you're forcing someone to use something, and maybe like because you set up a template one way, that like it forces them to just check a box, versus, or even if they are creating a template and that template doesn't fit for them, so they go and create another template, and then they want to copy some of the same things, but they don't actually tie exactly over. And so now they're like creating a new data point, right? Like just by changing the verbiage, or maybe by shortening something and like, giving it an acronym versus typing it all the way out, right? Now that's like on the back end, you have to connect those two data points in order to like see that stuff. Yeah. And so like, that's something that a lot of construction companies don't have, is that like person on the back end to clean up bad data. And so giving construction companies ways to have clean data and organized data and be able to create meaningful KPIs from that, I think is like, our job in building software, in this new age, right? Is like
giving them the guardrails
to like make sure that they're not going to like, it's a tool. You have to teach someone how to use the tool, right? And like there's certain capabilities of that tool that it can and cannot do. So yes, it's flexible and can work on any job, but like sometimes you need a hammer and not a screw gun.
You're basically saying, yes, we're flexible, but we've also put the guardrails on to make sure that we're not allowing our users to kind of go all over the place. We're giving them a sandbox within which to play in. And giving those guardrails oftentimes gives us the ability to be more creative, be more thoughtful about our data strategy and how do we want to approach our data and create our data for our project for this scenario, right? Because we understand, okay, we can't go way out here, but we can operate within this infrastructure.
Yeah. And then there's some data that's just going to come out of the box, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, you use this tool, you're going to get these KPIs, right? Like I think that's like the baseline. And then beyond that, it's how to give the people the guardrails to like create their extra data on how they want to use the tool to track, how many toilets were not meeting ADA compliance or whatever it was, right? Like
pull their insights that they're interested out of that. Exactly. Or create certain data points that might be customer unique to the job.
Exactly.
I'm going to take that back, by the way. I'm going to steal some of that.
Okay.
I'm like, how do I bring this into my own, development process? Because I think in many ways it's like, okay, there's a certain interpretation that I've done of the data from Mercator that is my own brain. That's why we're like, that's what we're building is like how I see it all. But then giving that flexibility from like, even just an insights perspective is super fascinating.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm excited to see Provizual. I've never seen it yet, so I really want to see it. I do have maybe another hot question to ask, which is about AI.
Okay.
I know that Provizual uses some AI, but we don't actively promote it, or you don't necessarily promote it. We do, which is interesting, and have also run into some scenarios where people have been like, AI, not interested. Tell me, what does construction understand about AI today?
I think a lot of people are using AI in construction. Now, I think a lot of it is like large language models they're communicating with and asking questions about things. And there's tools like Document Crunch that are like focused on like the legal aspect. In those instances, like they can see the guardrails like we were just talking about, like they know what the focus is. Like a lot of times, like it's what we were talking about before, like they want to see how the sausage is made, right? And if you don't understand how the sausage is made, like maybe you don't want to eat that sausage, I guess, right? Like I guess hot dogs, right? Like no one wants to know what's in a hot dog, right? So sometimes like that's like how people think about AI. It's like one, like, do you need to know what's in that hot dog? Like it's still a hot dog and it's gonna work for you, right? Like sometimes you don't need to say that, that you did all this stuff, to get there, right? It just needs to work. And I think a lot of times in construction, people just want the tool that's going to work for them. They don't need to know that there's this, AI behind it. It just needs to work, right? I think that's probably what most people in construction care about, right? The hype of AI doesn't matter to the superintendent who's been doing it his whole life, right? He just needs a system that's going to work in the field and it's going to be customizable to his project and work, the first time.
And so do you feel like AI is just this kind of like nebulous term then that in reality, people are just like, I don't know how it's made. I can't trust it. But if I come up against a product that, I don't know, may use AI in the background to create some synthetic data, I don't know about it. I don't need to know about it. It works. So I'm happy with it.
It's all about the use of it and how it's like served up to the user, right? If it's very text-based, like, they want to see the AI, they want to be able to ask it a question, right? but not all AI is like asking questions and getting a response, right? Some, agentic AI is just, it's going out in the background and it's doing a process and it's doing it better than, a human can because it's doing it constantly and it's doing it accurately every single time. So do you really need to, be exposed to that and do it? Like, it doesn't matter in a sales process, right? Like, you're selling hot dogs, you're not selling how hot dogs are made, right? So I think all the hot dog manufacturers out there would probably be with me on, they're not trying to promote what's inside of a hot dog. They're just trying to sell the hot dog.
I think that's amazing. This is a great analogy.
Okay.
I think that's something that most people don't honestly realize is like, yeah, there's AI for asking questions, but frankly, the bulk of the AI we work with is underneath the surface. You don't see it in the product.
Yeah.
And it's creating data sets that don't exist yet and that it would take an army of individuals to create.
Exactly.
And then it allows us to kind of stitch all that project information together so that we can actually tell you what's going on every single plot of land out there.
Yep.
Right. And to me, it's like, okay, double-edged sword. On the one side, there's the VC world that gets really excited about it. And then there's the actual customer who's like, I don't, just give me something that works.
Yeah.
So
yeah, the VCs care about the hot dog and how it's made. But the people who are buying it don't. I mean, it's tough, and that's probably one of the hardest things I've had to learn about going from construction to software is like, who cares about what, right? And like, what do I need to tell them, in order to, get the point across?
Yeah.
It's not that you're trying to hide information from someone. It's just like some people don't care about things. Like, why talk to them about that?
So coming out of AI and, buzzwords and whatnot, I mean, I think the mission that actually we are both driving towards is a construction world that is more data driven in its decision making. Like, what gets you excited about that future?
So a lot of what Provizual is focused on right now, using our AI, is basically creating metadata from static data, right?
Okay, hold on. What is metadata? Can you explain it to us?
What is metadata?
Yeah.
I guess metadata would be like the data that comes along with something that's like the data that you're not really seeing, right?
Like the descriptive data.
The descriptive data.
Yep.
Yeah. So we're creating like descriptive data from data that existed at one point in time, right? So don't want to get too far into.
Can you give an example? Because some people don't. I mean, we get into technical terms, but some people don't get it. Like,
so when you get into like that human, having to go and log into the city every single day, and like they can see that something has failed, and then 2 days later that it's passed. Well, did it take 2 days to get passed, or did it pass the day after? If you don't have that record, like, you would never know, right?
So you're actually creating data off like the comparison of two different statuses.
Because we're collecting it every day.
Yeah.
Right. Rather than collecting it at a single point in time, we're just viewing it at the most recent point in time. Because at the end of a project, a lot of cities across the US will just show you that everything's passed.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But they don't show you the history of how that was. Right. And so when you get into like data driven decisions, like, you're going into your next project and you're trying to hire a subcontractor. Don't you want to hire the subcontractor that, had the highest performance of their inspections and they passed 95% of the time? Or do you want to hire the subcontractor that passes 75% of the time, right? If you have that information, you can make a good data-driven decision to go and, hire the sub that's going to help you meet your construction schedule, most likely, right? So it's data that doesn't exist right now, because it would take an office engineer or someone on your team going in every single day and doing this like painstaking job. And if you miss a day, it's gone. Like, you missed the data point, right?
Completely.
So you have to do it every single day. And so that's like a really good use of agentic AI.
It ends up being, I always liken it to do you know the Always Sunny in Philadelphia, the red string and corkboard?
Yes.
Crazy
meme.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you'd literally have to have an army of people doing that on a regular basis.
Yeah.
To be able to stitch all of this together. But when you can pattern match, like what AI allows us to do, you can identify things like, okay, which sub is, we look at things like liens, for example. what developer is most likely or what sub is most likely to be litigious would be a path that we would take with that data.
Yeah.
And so super fascinating what we can do. And I don't know if this is kind of where you're heading with it, but I can tell you that like my original vision around Mercator was elevating building and construction excellence through transparent data for everyone. Because if we all know how each other builds, and we all know who we want to partner with, and we all know that there are certain people who don't build the way that we want to, we can start to elevate, like rising tides raises all ships, right? We can start to elevate how all of us operate and kind of reach new heights as a result. And that gets me pumped.
That could be your hottest take so far.
Oh, wow. Okay.
From the GC's perspective. A lot of GCs, and this is like, I think pretty prevalent across GCs, but we don't like to share data about performance to other GCs.
How come?
I think it's like still kind of, it's not taboo, but it's like, that's something that
secret sauce?
Yeah, secret sauce stuff, right? Like you hold on to that. We don't even want to know, like let someone know like what subs we use to build a building, right? Because that could mean another GC from another market can come in and like see the list of subs that you used, right? So like, that's where it gets like a little tiptoey here of like, you know, sharing too much, right?
What's the fear?
I think a lot of people have like the Walmart fear, right?
The Walmart fear?
The Walmart fear. I'm going to go full analogy on this podcast. But the Walmart fear of like, it's going to crush the small town businesses, right? And that the mega Walmart is going to come in and take over the, small town GC because they figured out who the small town GC was using as local subs. They came in from out of town. There's a very like big concept in construction of like buying jobs, right? Like you'll come in and like, we need to get into this market. So like, we'll do it for no fee, right? And like, that's kind of what Walmart can come in and do into a small town, which Walmart's going to come after me for this, I think.
Yeah. We'll bleep it out.
We'll bleep out Walmart.
Yeah. Every time you say it,
no.
Your mom will think you're cursing.
Yeah.
Okay. So now we get into conversation of like, does trust trump cost? Or does relationship trump cost? Or does cost trump relationship?
I think to stick on like the data side of things, right? Like data is going to be so important in the future. And I think like there is a real world where like maybe the small town GC goes, you know what? I think my relationships are really good. I'm going to push this data out and make more money and sell this to, other people, right? Like, there should be like some sort of sharing there where like we're using their data that they've collected. Like there should be some sort of back-end sharing. Maybe it's reduced cost on the tool or, rev share on that kind of thing. Or like, this is probably like the hottest take right now I have.
I want to wrap up with a question that I think you might be really good to answer. If you were advising construction leaders, what would you tell them is the key to successfully navigating technological changes over the next 5 years?
I hate saying it. I think this is the biggest thing, but I think the biggest thing is process. If you don't have good processes in place today, you're not going to collect the data that you need in the systematic way in order for it to be actionable data in the future. So like standard operating procedure, like I don't think you need to go like write a whole book of SOPs, but like, managing to a process is extremely important. And there's no time too early to start that, especially with where AI is going. Like it can go in back and clean up your old data or, tie your old process to your new process. But like start right now with focusing on processes and implementing good processes that can be consistently applied across all of your projects. That's like the biggest thing that you need to do right now to be prepared for the future, right? That's going to drive how AI understands how your company works. That's going to, drive, your actionable KPIs in the future. That's going to drive literally everything. It all starts with core processes and following those to the T.
Music to my ears, standardization. I come from a data background. So I'm like, whenever we can standardize. How can people find out about Provizual? How can people follow you through your journey building Provizual?
Awesome. Follow me on LinkedIn and provizual.com. And you can book a demo with me, and it'll be me who shows up.
John, it's been a pleasure. I'm so excited we got to do this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.